Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the January 2020 Open edX Community Hangout, the first of the year and of the new decade. It's very exciting. We have a few items on the agenda. As always, I'm interested to hear from you out in the community if there are things that you would like to present or if you would like to hear. I know that you are all active all the time on what you're doing with the Open edX software, and that makes it so that you don't have time to think about what you'd like to present. But my guess is that during that time, you're doing interesting things that people would like to hear about. So think about what you might want to tell the community. Think about what you wish you could hear from the community, and we can put it on the agenda. Let me see how to get the slides up here. I made some slides for today. There is a share screen thing in Zoom somewhere, right?
Yes, it's the green blue button in the middle.
Of course. Okay, so the first thing that I put on the agenda is Python 3 and Juniper. So we have been working this year with some help from all of you to get our platform onto Python 3 because Python 2's end of life was January 1st of this year. I'm pleased to announce that we did finally get onto Python 3 on December 17th. We pushed to production on Python 3 and didn't go back. Full disclosure, there were a few times where we pushed to production on Python 3 and did go back, but that's how we know it works. So as of the middle of December, we're running on Python 3. That milestone let us make a thing that we called Juniper Alpha 1. So because there's been a lot of changes between Ironwood and Juniper, and because we got everything onto Python 3, which introduced some risk, we wanted to get version out into the community for testing, and we called that Juniper Alpha 1. It's different than previous releases because it is not a full release branch yet. And what that means is that all of the continuing work on master in all of the repos will still be in Juniper. In the past, when we've announced a release for testing, like Ironwood, that would have been a new branch that would be protected from all the continuing changes, and only fixes to the stability and behavior of Ironwood would go onto that branch. That is not the case for this Juniper branch. This is just a point in time that we can start testing Juniper, but there's continuing development happening on the master branches. We do need testing. We have gotten some testing. Thank you, Pierre. You'll notice in the discourse forums that there are topics there about problems that people have found. They're tagged with Juniper, the Juniper tag in discuss.openedx.org. Please test out the release. Talk about what you find in discourse. We're setting up a Jira Epic to hold tickets so that we can keep track of all those problems and make sure they all get fixed in a disciplined way. But I didn't quite get that done before now. The future of Juniper is that we are currently working now on migrating from Django 1.11 to Django 2 because Django 1 support ends in April. So we'll be moving up to Django 2.2, which is a long-term support release of Django. And when we release Juniper is going to be based on how that migration goes. So if it looks like that's not going to drag on, then we'll wait for that to happen so we can get a Juniper out that we don't have to quickly follow with an upgraded Django release afterwards. If it does look like it's going to drag on, then we'll consider doing a Juniper without it and a Koa after that. But right now, the prospects look pretty good for the Django migration to go well. And so I expect that we will do a Juniper release after the Django migration has happened. I'm not sure what else to say about that. Are there questions from people about the Python or Django migration or Juniper in general?
For Django, I know with Python, a lot of the effort was getting the code up to Python 3 compatibility. With Django, is the effort to make sure that you dealt with any deprecated Django issues, or are you planning to take advantage of any of the Django 2
Right.
features?
So it's the same situation for both. So the main thing we have to do is to get off of using whatever features Django has stopped supporting. And Django is very disciplined about warning you that it's going to go away and then actually taking it away. But that does mean that we do have to stop using things. They don't support stuff forever. And so you do have to do real work to keep moving up. In terms of using new Django features, I'm not even sure, frankly, to be perfectly honest, I don't even personally know what's in Django 2 that would be cool to use.
Okay.
I know that, for instance, for the Django 3 migration, we don't have any large plans to use new Python 3 features throughout the code base. Although that's certainly a possibility to us now. The main goal is to make sure that we stay within the support windows of both Python and Django.
Good, okay. Great, thank you. That's what I assumed, I just wanted to make sure.
Sure. Okay. So
another quick question there.
Sure.
Are you, with the Python, you got the community involved in doing that? Are you doing the same for Django, or is this largely an effort that you within edX are doing that port?
So the way that I should stop sharing so you can see my face. Hello. The way the Python effort worked was that we kind of got started slowly and were using, we were encouraging lots of community contributions. And that was the type of thing that worked pretty well because there were lots of Python 3 changes that were very, very small, a very simple change to make to one line, except it wasn't one line, it was 100 and 1,000 lines, but that was still something that was kind of easy to farm out and pull in. The Django migration tends to be a little bit more involved. To get rid of a Django feature and replace it with the new Django feature is a little harder to be sort of a quick drop-in contribution that worked really well for Python 3. So the end of the Python 3 effort was us getting a little bit more ourselves on top of it, and the Django effort is going to be like that too. So while we certainly welcome help with the Django migration, and we can make public where the backlog is for that work, we've tried to scope it out and resource it so that we can just sort of plow through it and do it. Okay. Nimisha, I don't know if you wanted to correct me on any of that.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly right. But I will say, Erin and others on the Hangout, if you have the capacity and are able to contribute to these upgrades efforts, I was going to bring that up in my slide, then please reach out. We're trying to figure out what's the best way to do this such that people are able to work on things autonomously and then still contribute back and so forth. So there might be like a chunk of work that we can give. And Jeremy Bowman on edX's side is the one who's leading that effort here. He's actually contracting out with some external teams right now, one in Arbisoft, and then he's looking for another contracting company. And we love to have the community help us maintain the platform. And so from that perspective, if you can, bring forth, let's say you can say, oh, I have a team of 3 people who can dedicate their effort towards this, that would go a long way. And then Jeremy could think about how he can distribute this effort.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Misha. That makes sense. I wonder if in the past there's thing where we often get caught up and we end up having to do work are some of the either X blocks, getting some of those up to speed, or we often have to do work in the configuration repo. But in terms of what would be impacted by Django, it would be X blocks and other packages that aren't necessarily in the core and like edX might not be using, but those of us in the community do. And so there might be an area where we could help out and contribute. Is we're gonna have to do those anyhow. And so if we're able to, if something is its own repository, if we're able to focus our energies there, then that may be a way we can contribute versus trying to integrate into the say edX platform.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think if there are extensions like that that the community is using, and even things that perhaps we ourselves here at edX are using, but they're coded as extensions, it might be a good way to be able to tackle those. So I'll put it in our chat, just a link to the Django upgrade plan that Jeremy has, which lists a bunch of the dependencies and other things, and how you could get a sense of how he's thinking about approaching it and some of the guidelines that he's put forward.
Thank you.
That does bring up something I just want to highlight. I think that maybe was sort of covered already is the project plan that Amisha will share that Jeremy is largely driving is for that core stuff. But if there's a way to augment, Confluence or put it somewhere, if there's a way to make it so that some of the really common or popular extensions in the community that you will have to upgrade, you can share out with others. It might be that, it's a very basic, but it's a way for maybe there to be some shared visibility on not having two different teams upgrade the same libraries that are really commonly used outside, and just, be mindful of like, okay, if they're going to do that, we'll start in another place. Similarly, for the edX platform core, if there are subsystems that you guys use a lot, or have even modified and maintained modifications yourselves, your support in those subsystems would be helpful. So I'm microphone wise, we can try something else next time. Can you not hear me at all? I'm using the same mic as Ned and muted on the machine. That may or may not be working.
I think it is working. It's just confusing.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Hi, everyone. We have a big fancy microphone, but it's hard to share. And I don't know how to control which video shows up at the top. Okay, so just to reiterate, we're always interested in getting your help with all the things that need to be done. And this type of upgrade work is the type of uncontroversial, very clear when it's done kind of work that might be really easy to share. And we can try to be more public about the backlogs for those sorts of things. I'm getting advice on microphones. That's great. About the Google Summer of Code, the challenge that always brings up is having to have someone who can mentor that person well enough during the summer to make it successful. And edX has a summer intern program in-house as it is. So we haven't really felt like we've had that extra energy that we could devote to something like Google Summer of Code, or there was another one that we had been looking into at one point. I forget the name of it now. But it sort of overlaps with an existing internship program that sort of gets in the way there. Okay. Any other thoughts about Juniper?
The only other question I had about Juniper was with respect to whether there's any intent on moving to Ubuntu 18 or just sticking with Ubuntu 16 for the duration of this release.
Right, so this release is still going to be on 16, and that's because we expect to still be within the support window of 16 for the duration of Juniper. I can share the release. I'll actually show it to you right now if I can get to that window. We have a support windows spreadsheet that we use to track these things. That looks like this. And I can share this out, but we expect that 16, which is this highlighted in black maroon bar here, will take us for at least another year, not much longer than another year, but out to there. So if we can get Koa out before this time next year, then 16 should be okay.
Sounds good. That's what I thought, just double checking.
Yep. No, it's been, because Ubuntu releases are supported for 5 years, it's very easy to feel like, wow, this is getting really old. Shouldn't we be off of this by now? But actually they do support it for 5 years. So you can sit on them for a very long time. Okay. Oops, I shouldn't have stopped sharing. One of these days I'll learn how to do this stuff. Okay. So 2020, we're all happy about 2020. One of the great things about 2020 is that's when the Open edX 2020 conference is. And we have just now opened registration for the conference. So I expect that all of you got an email this morning linking to Eventbrite to register for the conference. And I encourage you to go and buy early bird tickets. There will be a date at which the prices go up, and you should get your tickets now. The conference is going to be very similarly structured to previous conferences. We'll have long form tutorials and workshops on Tuesday. We'll have classic breakouts and lightning talks on Wednesday and Thursday, and then open-ended deep dive discussions on instructional design and technical topics on Friday. One change this year is that edX is going to be offering its Introduction to Course Authoring with Studio course as an add-on ticket on Tuesday. And we're hoping to entice more edX partners into the conference, partly with that training as a possibility in Portugal, rather than having them fly here to Cambridge to take that training. So when you get to the tickets, you'll see that as an add-on that's a little bit different than last year. So just to clarify, the add-on is not for Tuesday, it's for a thing that happens on Tuesday. If you buy one of the plain regular 3 tickets, those are all 4-day tickets, Tuesday through Friday, and we'll get you into trainings and tutorials and workshops on Tuesday, just not the edX run Intro to Studio training on Tuesday. The call for speakers opens next week. We're getting that all in order for all of you to propose talks. So get ready for that. The call will be open for only 5 weeks. So there's not going to be a big long 3-month time for you to procrastinate and then send in all your proposals at the last minute after 3 months. You have to procrastinate for only 5 weeks and send them all in at the last minute after 5 weeks. So put that on your calendar, plan for that. We're looking forward to your proposals. Last year we had 3 times as many talks as we could take, maybe 4 times as many proposals as we could take for talks. So the competition does get stiff. So make them look good, put your best ideas into them, and send them in when the proposals open. Call for proposals opens next week.
Hey Ned, I've got a question about the talk review process.
Yeah.
I know in the past it's always been edX reviewing all the proposals, and I think after the last conference, there was some talk of maybe opening up that review process more widely to other folks in the community. One, to ease the burden on edX folks, but also to maybe increase diversity of different subjects and different talks that maybe might get rejected by edX. And just curious if there's been any talk of, relooking that process.
So we have been talking about that, and I think we might have some room to do that a little bit now. We're using a new tool for the review process called sessionize.com, which seems very capable, and which I think would make that an easier thing to allow for. One of the tricky things there has always been that the set of people we'd reach out to help us review talks are also exactly the people that propose talks. I'm not sure how to help with that.
Yeah, I think they would have to probably sit out of voting on their own talk, right?
Yeah, something like that. And I don't know if there's a way to enforce. It gets a little bit tricky that way. But yeah, last year our talk review process leaned very hard on the idea that we could get everyone in a room together at the same time, even if they were remote, which, while we were hoping could scale to some remote people, turns out didn't even scale that well to local people. Sessionize has better tools for for sort of farming it out into little chunks and getting back information. So we are going to think about that. We haven't completely nailed it down. That's one of the things. The way this conference planning works is, oh, we're opening registration in a week. Like this whole week is just thinking about registration. And now it's, oh, we're opening the CFP in a week. We better figure out CFP. So yeah, we can look into that.
Cool, thanks.
I think I figured out the bidirectional versus directional, so hopefully you guys can hear me.
Can you hear Marco?
Sort of.
Yes.
We
Great.
can.
Okay.
Yes, clearly.
I did want to make one minor note about the conference. It actually might be that this is often the case, so you guys would know better than I, but there's a little note on the conference website that says, hey, reminder, you should take a look early at getting hotels and other things for Lisbon because it's high season for tourism, apparently there. Yep. So in case that wasn't on your radar, just a heads up that like maybe you guys always book very early hotels and accommodations or Airbnb or whatever you choose to do. But just in case it was a special time, want to make sure you're able to get as many members of the team as possible. And often that has to do with how expensive lodging and travel is. So that's all.
Right. And actually a little bit more detail on that. When we went to Lisbon and went around talking to hotels saying, hey, can this be an official hotel of the conference? They all said, no, it's high tourist season. We're not cutting you any deals. So there's no particular hotel, conference hotels that have discounted room rates. We've got 2 recommendations for hotels, but you're just a person at a hotel. You're not part of the conference at that hotel. So that's the level of housing demand at that time of year in this location to contend with. Any other questions or excitement about the conference? I know you're all too excited to speak. I know it's a challenge sometimes. All right, let's go to the next item.
While you're on the topic, I do have one other note.
Go, Marco.
Which is, it strikes me that both for last year and even this year, if we have truly that many talks that we're unable to show at the conference, events like this or even other events that we could do more frequently might be as great a place for us to record and sort of share and have the video of all the cool things happening in the community. So anyways, just a passing thought, but we'll obviously try and do the best job we can with the conference, but we maybe could think about other ways to do things like this right here. True. Or if even individual members of the community want to like host a hangout like thing where you record and present the thing that you have to share about Open edX, even if you can't schedule at a time where everyone can join. But we could still maybe share those videos in a semi-public place or link to them on YouTube or do something. Seems like a cool opportunity to showcase more often throughout the year as well. So just a minor community plug.
Right, and we are interested to hear other ideas for how to collect people together and get the word out and share ideas and all that stuff. So right now we're focused on the conference, which is a very classic, everyone fly around the world to one place for 3 days kinds of thing. But obviously, like we're using today, we have the technology to get together in other ways. And we're always interested in ideas. Okay. Architecture update, which will be Demisha, or do I have to load?
Do you have to what?
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, sounds good. So I wanted to just give folks an update on a few things and also more of a reminder as well to make sure everyone's aware. So the first one was the deprecation process. We will link to the OEP around deprecation removal. But just want to let you guys know, we are actively engaged in removing old functionality and haven't yet seen that much participation from the community on the Depper tickets or the discourse announcements. So I just want to make sure that people are aware of those and you do feel comfortable posting on those if you have any questions on what it is being removed or what it's being replaced by, and any questions around the dates and timing of it and so forth. So, and just to remind everyone, like essentially this process is to sort of help us catch up a little bit on a bunch of things that we have in the code base that have accumulated over time, and we just never got a chance to remove things that we no longer need because we didn't prior to this process being put in place. And then going forward, as we are adding more things in the code base, we'll need to, if we're adding version 3 of something, we want to make sure that we do remove version 1 along the way so that our code base continues to be streamlined and as maintainable as possible. So any questions on that before I move forward to the next thing?
And I'll just chime in that there is a deprecation channel in Slack, and the announcements also go into Discourse, so you can watch them in a couple of places to make sure that we're not pulling the rug out from under you in some way that we don't realize.
Just an idea here. Are we doing anything like making logs of what's going to get deprecated? Because that's something that we have been playing with internally. Like just make a log that says, warning, this is going to be deprecated. So when we look at the logs and we don't even know that we are using X or Y feature, we get a message.
You mean put a like a live warning into the code first, so that?
Yeah, like just to bring it up here, I was removing the last pieces of microsites that we are using this last week, and it would have helped to have like something that says every time that the code goes through that function, say this is getting removed, so I know like it hasn't shown up in my logs for the last 2 weeks. I know it's gone for good, and I'm no longer using it. Something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I think for some things we might be able to do that. And I do think that when it comes to perhaps some APIs, we have to also, as we think more about our API strategy in the future as well, just there might be a process for that when we move from one version to another. There may be the right place for when to set warnings. For some of the things that we're removing, so for instance, we're removing an old implementation of authentication right now. So it's based on Django OAuth provider, and we're moving it to instead use Django OAuth toolkit. So it can be very noisy if to emit warnings. So, but we might be able to come up with some strategies of only warning once, but there too, then I don't know if people will miss out on those warnings. So, but yeah, we're not as structured right now, to be honest, of like actually emitting warnings before doing this. Right now, our warning is really more, we're using the Depper Jira board as well as these Slack channels and, Discourse channels as the means of communicating that out. So for now, that's what we're using, but yeah.
Now, the message comes more from the look of, maybe I don't even know I'm using a certain feature until I see the message saying, this is deprecated. Okay, I'm using something that's deprecated that I didn't even know existed. So then I go and look at it and say, okay, I had this feature flag on that was supposed to be on for one release already, and then I get up to speed. It could be.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I think that sounds good. I'll take that back to the team and see where we could put that into our process. Okay, so the next thing also is a reminder more than anything. So we talked about this last year as well, but in addition to open edX proposals, which are like system-wide documentations of our architecture decisions, we've also started using what we're calling ADRs, which are architecture decision records that are more localized, co-located with the code. So those will be in individual repos, and alongside the code, there will be technical decision records that the teams are documenting as they go. We are finding this to be useful so far, and so far it seems like we have about 80 or so of those. So in the slide, I put basically the search query if you want to look in GitHub of what are all of the ones that are available right now. So some of those, you'll see within edX platform. You might see some in the credential service, and and some within the front end platform repos as well. But so this seems to be a much more widely adoptable way of documenting decisions. So I do want to continue to support it because it is important for people to know the rationale behind the changes that they're making. And OEPs are a little bit more heavyweight, so this is a little bit more lightweight. And it's also co-located with the code, so it has the advantage of being able to create pull requests that are your decision records along with the code changes that you're making. So just FYI that is happening, and Ned is also working with OpenCraft to see if they're working on a tool that will allow people to get notified when such ADRs are created or updated. So we're hoping that there will be some sort of communication that goes out to, and people could subscribe to know when such ADRs are updated or created. But in the meantime, that notification isn't in place. So just FYI that is there. And from two reasons. The FYI is one is that, hey, by the way, that exists. But secondly, I would love for other Open edX community to also try these things and see if that's also working for you. So even if you're creating a separate X block or your own Open edX repo or whatnot, if you keep track of your decision records and ADRs, and that could be a standardized way of us, keeping track of the rationale behind the code. And essentially ADR is essentially you just say, what's the context, what's your decision, and what are the consequences. So it's meant to be very lightweight template for keeping track of these things. And I didn't put a link to it, but there is the OEP, what was it? That is the developer docs OEP.
I think it's 17.
Yeah, 19.
Oh,
19?
Oh yeah. So yeah, 17 is feature toggles, and developer docs OEP is 19. So OEP 19 also has more information on ADRs. So any questions on that?
Do it live.
Okay, cool, thanks. And the last thing on this slide, at least, was Microfrontends. We talked a lot about it at the last conference. There's been some conversations since the last conference and other channels and whatnot. And so that is moving forward. We have, over the last year, Marco, myself, and the team had worked on rewriting a couple of our pages to be microfrontends instead of Django server-side rendered pages. And so, but now we want to take a pivot and actually allow each individual development teams also to go forward in helping us with this replatforming effort. So the document I linked here is essentially, it's actually an ADR that talks about microfrontends, and it has some information that we think will be useful for the community. It's just giving some context on what they are, and also context on how we have deployed them at edX.org, and hoping that it allows information, it gives information to the community of then how, well, you can model deployment for Open edX based on how we've done it for edX.org. We'd love to be able to have some sort of standardized way perhaps for Open edX, and I'm hoping that that comes from the community. I know Regis is working on something called Micromanager, I believe, that might include deployments for microservices as well as microfrontends. And if that's something that the community feels can be adopted for other Open edX instances as well, then that would be great. But anyway, if you guys have further questions on microfrontends themselves and whatnot, then there is a front-end Slack channel in Open edX Slack that you can reach out or start a discourse thread. But essentially, David Joy and Adam Butterworth here at edX have led the technical effort on the front-end side of that work. So,
right, and just to clarify, the only two supported installation methods by edX right now of the Open edX software are DevStack for running in Docker for development, and the native installation for installing everything on one machine on an Ubuntu 16.04 box. Unless I've missed a recent development, neither of those mechanisms includes all of the micro frontends that are tagged for Open edX, meaning that we don't yet have supported installation mechanisms for the micro front ends, and we're looking for help from the community to figure out how best to fit those into the deployment mechanisms that the community uses. And that's why this ADR in particular, it'd be a really good one to dive into to contribute to the deployment story for micro front ends in Open edX.
Yep. And just a question for the community. Are you guys aware of the work that Regis is doing for this?
There's Misha.
I'm not, and I'm over.
Okay. So one of the things is that we rewrote the profile page, the account settings page, and for those of you that use our e-commerce service, we also rewrote the payment page, the basket page in e-commerce. So those are three main ones, and then there was another order history one. Right now we're looking at actively to rewrite the core courseware page. So basically the unit subsection one, and because these are alternative implementations, we would like to remove the old implementations. So right now there's a standing Depper ticket that is, right now we threw out the date of, can we get rid of the initial implementations that are not micro front end based by the end of this year, so in December of 2020. If we need to extend that a little bit, we can. But I love for the community to start adopting micro front ends, because since that is the direction we want to go. And that will then also allow us to remove the old implementations as well. So right now we're supporting both old and new, and mostly it's to help the community catch up as we're moving forward with this. So, but yeah, so I love to be able to connect you guys with the work that Regis is doing, and if he needs support, whether financially or development resource-wise, whatever it may be, that would be great if the community could, back him up on the effort that he's doing for this.
I've been very involved in the process, especially on the theming parts of the micro frontends. But one of the things that have been holding us back is that we live in Ironwood right now, and in Ironwood you cannot use it because the JWT tokens are just like a little bit after Ironwood. So
right,
we were kind of waiting to have the Juniper alpha, which is what now comes out. So
oh, awesome. Okay.
Kind of at the start of the process.
Right. That was one of the reasons to make sure we could get to a Juniper alpha, was because there's so much that has changed since Ironwood, including this major shift in front-end technology.
Sure, and finding out how to send the information to the client or the React page, because we will also need that to make the plugin that we publish that works with WordPress actually work with newer versions.
Right,
exactly.
And that's exactly the kind of thing we need to hear from the community, because you use the software in very different ways than we do. And so there may be use cases that we need to be educated on and take into account.
Now that you mention it, I could do a talk about how to use a plugin in WordPress to make a marketing site that has the nice.
Are you free in February?
Yeah, free-ish.
Okay, I'll be in touch, Felipe. Thank you.
The other two things just upcoming FYI, which I didn't put on the slide, but so our DevOps team is actually looking at Kubernetes and seeing how to move our deployments to Kubernetes, and that will then also possibly touch upon how we, what our dev stack looks like. So FYI on that will be upcoming. I don't have exact timeline of when they're starting to do this already for notes deployment. They've updated that to use Kubernetes, but and they're planning to look at other services as well. So that Kubernetes being open source, and that can also impact how Open edX, comes up to speed on the technologies for containerization. And how that impacts micro front-end and microservice deployments for you guys. So, and then what was the other one?
So, Namisha, there's another slide here. Do you want to jump to that? Architecture coming? Is that?
Yeah, Sure,
Okay.
yeah, that sounds great.
I didn't know. I hadn't seen that one, so.
Yeah, so this one is just give you a glimpse into our roadmap for the architecture team and what's coming up ahead. So the upgrade work, as you guys know, that's all happening. But essentially, strategically, when we're thinking about upgrades going forward, we do want to have a much better story around continuous upgrades. So Python, is pretty much on the tail end of that. Django is now currently happening. Then we're looking at Elasticsearch and Mongo. But we wanted to, like the third bullet talks about automated reports on upgrades and deprecation warnings. There's work that Jeremy and the team is doing right now so that, we have a way of being a lot more proactive about upgrades rather than last minute, oh shoot, it's end of life thing, we better hurry and get a team together and upgrade. So I think this is more of our way of keeping ahead of upgrades as they are coming and tackling them. And so the automated reports will help, plus, like I said, some of this outsourcing effort that we're looking into. And if the community can help towards that effort as well, then definitely reach out to us if you have a small team that you could put percentage on this effort or whatever it may be. And the other thing is that we're doing with upgrades, we are standardizing all of our repos so that they all follow OAuth2, which says exactly what the metadata should be, and making sure that they all have a consistent way of doing dependency upgrades of Python, make files and all those things. So that also will help us with future upgrades down the line. So that's what the team's working on. The other thing around edX platform, FYI, we haven't yet started on this, but I do hope to do so in this quarter. Putting better boundaries in edX platform, I think that's going to help the community as well as ourselves. Just like what's core, what's an extension, and give more direction on the different Django apps that are in there. And then the other thing is ADRs within an edX platform of how we want an edX platform to evolve. So what the directory structure should be, what the Python API should be. I know the lack of Python APIs are preventing actually even further adoption of, removing some of our Django apps out of edX platform and creating them into, Django app plugins and whatnot. And so making those things very clear. And then even testing within edX platform, that's a opaque thing at this time, exactly where we want to head with that. So I'm hoping that we have, like, for the next, from now until June, spending some time on getting some of the ADRs in edX platform to date. So how we want to evolve our monolith. And then feature toggles was the other one too. That's the OAuth 17 talks about toggles and our perspective on it, and it does also put a recommendation on the reporting for toggles. But we need to basically do the implementation work on getting the reports for feature toggles. So as part of that, what I think will be useful for the community is we're also going to then take some time on annotating all the toggles and Django settings that we have, so that it's clear what the toggle is for and whether it should be expired or whatnot, and things like that. And then that should then lead to us being able to remove old expired toggles. So that's that. Yep. And the last thing was testing strategy, which, like I touched upon it when I talked about edX platform, but we do want to get a better sense of, what our tests are and how we test and things like that. So. Right.
So Nimisha, there were a few questions in the chat. One is regarding Microfrontends, since those are React apps, are the APIs that will power them available for other people to use, for instance, to make an Open edX headless app?
Yeah, so one of the advantages of decoupling the front end from the back end, there are two advantages, right? So one is, yes, it does expose APIs, but the other one was our back end is very complex. And so by separating out the front end, it allows you to make modifications to the front end much easier because it's a smaller front end away from the complex back end. Now, in terms of the APIs, though, I will say that Yes, you can use those APIs. However, in terms of the support level for those APIs, I would like to annotate different APIs so it's clear what is, what is more long-term supported versus short-term supported. And some of these APIs that we'll be developing and we have developed, they might be they're more feature-based APIs in the sense that they're not domain, they're not, sorry, hold on, I have to just drink some water. Recovering from a cold, but some of those APIs are more short-term minded. They're thinking about just what the feature is that we want to develop. So, I mean, it's more like a back-end for front-end type of based API. The APIs that we want to eventually, though, support are more domain-oriented. And when we're thinking about the courseware page and rewriting the courseware page, there the team is thinking more about, okay, how do we have an API for course sequence? What's the API for, is course blocks sufficient, or do we need to enhance that further? But that's very different for the e-commerce payment page. Payment page, it was really more of like just being able to develop an API and just to render the payment front end. So anyway, to summarize that, I'm trying to say that there is a different class of APIs. And yes, the APIs will be exposed, and yes, you can use them. However, the support level for them will vary. And I think once we do more work on our APIs, which I didn't put in this API, I didn't put that in this slide as what's coming, but I do hope that we'll finally get some time to work on that as well.
Right. So to just word that a little bit differently, what we're trying to do is for each API to be very thoughtful about which ones are tactical to get a feature built and which ones are strategic for long-term support. And they are not all going to be tactical. There will be ones that are, yes, this is meant for lots of uses by lots of people and will be public and will be documented. Right. Sergey asked, what extent is your team willing to accept infrastructure proposals and solutions? So our DevOps team at edX is actively working on how to move the infrastructure technology forward. And Kubernetes is a word I hear a lot coming over the cubicle walls. So they probably would be interested to hear from you. I don't know how far along their plans are, how firmly baked they are, but I personally would be very interested to see some community injections into that process to get the best skills out there, more people thinking about how best to do it. And certainly if it can eventually evolve into something that is offered to the community as the way to do their supported installations, that would be great too. Let's see what else is in here. The pages, we're going to make them public. I'm now falling behind on the chat too.
Yep. There was this question about get some updates on Python APIs such as student.api or contentstore.api modules. So Omar, do you want to add more color to that?
Well, so Omar wanted to talk about course access groups, and I don't know if that's part of what you're asking about now, Omar. We could actually just switch over to Omar, depending on what.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dave and Marco and Nimisha. So yeah, so I'll share some code snippets quickly, and sorry my camera is not on today. Okay, I can share. Awesome. All right. Sure. Yeah, 1 sec. All right. So I'll search. Okay, so I've been working with my team recently to add some access controls to the platform and make it pluggable. And one of the most difficult things that I found is actually to find a way to make search respect the famous function has access. All right. So I've done this. It's basically just a hack, but there is a plan for me to make it actually contributable and available to the rest of the community. So as you can see, this is the edX search. Instead of returning the results as is, I'm returning the results after, as you can see on this line, whether it has access or not.
Are we doing a code review right now, or no? Okay.
No, this is not a code review. This is just a, sharing the recent efforts that I've been working with in my team. So why do I want to touch this? Why do I want, course discovery results to be filtered? Because I'm working on something called course access groups, and sorry, because there is no UI right now at all, like course access groups. So this is the the end product that will show up. This is a new plugin, hopefully, for OpenEdX that allows. This is still early stage, so there's literally no UI. So this is eventually, let's say, imagine an enterprise customer that wants to show some courses to some group of learners and show the other another group to another other set of courses to another group. That's basically course as a group. It's one of the top requested features by enterprise customers that we have on our customer profile and at AppSembler. So this is something that we've been working on. As you can see, the platform out of the box doesn't have any pluggability for access control. So I've done something called course access backends. All right, I think all right, sorry. This came on for me and I was not prepared. All right, this is it. So this is the longer post, and most of the, Dave and Regis have already chimed in and reviewed it here. So this is still early stage work, but it's maturing, and I wanted to share it with you because I would guess that other people in the community might want to at least take a look and see if they want to I don't know, like critique the work, share it, sort of like use it or just contribute it, or maybe say that this is not really a good idea. One of the challenges that I'm currently calling for help in it is that edX search is not supporting. I want to refactor this hack, and this is the center of my questions today, because it's just a hack, and I want to make it in a more proper way. And the other thing that I would like to get some help in is to actually figure out whether has access will survive, and it won't. I already know the answer because in Juniper it probably won't be there at all. So I want to get some help in order to plan my way through it using the other type of access control backends that is being developed. That's it for my half-baked demo. And if you have any questions or anything else, okay, I'll stop sharing.
I'm going to use this precedent to say that showing code in GitHub counts as a demo. That's great. That works for me.
One thing I will flag is I think I'm no longer in the Zoom, but I think there are other folks at edX who might be better positioned to give more interesting feedback, certainly than me, for example. So if this is something that you can describe or share in a discourse thread, perhaps you already have, we would be able to potentially sort of help you link to someone who might be able to give more feedback on that. But anyways, that's
yeah.
all.
So I think directionally we do want to. There was an ADR that was created to use Bridgekeeper for access control in edX platform, and so Kale Pennington, he's the one who's moving that forward. But so have you gotten a chance to? Actually, I'm bringing up the discourse thing right now, but yeah, to Marco's point, I think we will need to talk about this further in discourse. But I will say that overall, though, making sure that the search results that return are access controlled, permissioned, protected, and whatnot before the search results are there, that seems like a feature that we would want here also. So yeah. So overall, I think the feature definitely makes sense, and I think the line, and then I think the code to get there will be something that we'll need to figure out as we go there. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Ned. Yeah.
So I just want to say we're almost out of time, and I'm probably going to get kicked out of this room. So I just want to wrap up. First, Omar, I really appreciate that you're doing work on those plugins, that you talked about it in discourse. You got both Dave Ormsby and Kale Pennington there commenting on it, which is a demonstration that discourse can work. I hope everyone goes into discourse and thinks about what's working about it and what's not. I'm interested to hear about that too, but we don't have time to talk about it today. And for the Hangouts in general, let me know what you want to show. We can plan it a little bit better so that there's more time for what you've got. I'm glad that Omar had a moment here, but maybe he wanted more, and we can plan it ahead of time if you get in touch.
No, I've got more than enough time. Thank you so much, Naz.
Okay, good. I would still like to know ahead of time if you want to present, because then I feel less stressed out during the recording.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, thank you all for joining. Here's to a great 2020. Buy your conference tickets. Think about what you want to show, what you want to hear, go into discourse and talk to people, and keep educating the world, because that's what we're all about. So I'm really excited that you're excited about Open edX and have joined us today. Thanks for coming. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.